The fluorescent lights above me were buzzing, faint and rhythmic, almost like a warning siren that had given up screaming. My left arm had gone limp, and I couldn't feel the tips of my fingers. My head felt like it had been split open with something cold and heavy. The room spun slowly, nauseatingly. "Can you tell me your name?" a nurse asked, leaning over me. Anna," I managed to whisper. "Please, can you call my parents?" She nodded and disappeared behind a curtain. Minutes passed. Then hours. Nobody came. I tried again. My hands trembled as I clutched the phone. I called Mom first, straight to voicemail. Then Dad, nothing. I sent a message to our family group chat. "I'm in ER. Something's wrong. Please come. Please." At first, I thought maybe they hadn't seen it. Maybe they were asleep.
Busy.
Then the notification popped up. "Mom's typing." Finally, relief washed over me. Until I read it. "Don't scare us like that. Mark is having a full-blown meltdown over this ticket. We're with him. Don't call in a panic if you're not dying." I stared at the screen, heart thudding. I was in a panic. And I was dying. Maybe not in the Hollywood dramatic sense. But something was seriously wrong with my body.
My speech was slurred.
My limbs were failing. The doctor said the next few hours were critical. But all they saw was drama. And worse, inconvenience. Later, I found out they were with Mark at the DMV, arguing over a suspended license because he'd blown off 3 court dates. When they finally arrived, sometime past 3 a.m., I had already been through a CT scan and a spinal tap. Mom walked in, hair perfectly straightened, holding a lukewarm coffee. "Okay," she exhaled. "What now?" Dad followed behind her, looking irritated. "We left Mark mid-crisis, you know that, right?" I was lying on the hospital bed with monitors attached to my chest, an oxygen line in my nose, and a nurse adjusting my four. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Just air. "Is this a migraine thing again?" Mom asked. "You get these episodes when you're stressed." The nurse glanced at her and said firmly, "Actually, we're testing for a TIA. It's a kind of mini-stroke." Mom blinked. But she's only 28. The nurse gave a tight smile. "Strokes don't check ID." They stayed for exactly 12 minutes. They didn't ask if I was okay.
Didn't touch my hand.
Didn't even sign the visitor log. I watched them leave like they were stepping out of a restaurant they didn't enjoy. And in that moment, quiet, cold, and hooked to machines, I realized something far heavier than any diagnosis. I was never the priority. They say the middle child is often forgotten. But I wasn't even the middle. I was the only daughter. And somehow, still invisible. Mark was the golden boy from the moment he entered the world, red-faced and howling like he owned the house. Our parents doted on him like he was some divine miracle, the answer to a prayer none of us remembered saying. He broke things, I got blamed. He lied, I got punished for not guiding him better. He came home drunk at 17 and they said, "Boys will be boys." When I cried because he called me names or slammed my door in my face, I was told, "Don't be dramatic, Anna. You know how Mark is. Why do you always make things harder?" I learned very young that in our house, attention was currency. And I was broke. I once brought home a certificate for winning the state writing competition. My mom glanced at it and said, "That's nice, sweetie. Can you help your brother with his math homework now? He's drowning." Mark failed math 3 times. I stayed up with him for hours to help him pass on the 4th. He barely thanked me. They bought him a new phone. I got straight A's. They forgot to attend the award ceremony. Even when I got into college, on scholarship, they barely looked up from their bills. Mark, meanwhile, got into a local community college, dropped out twice, and then racked up thousands in speeding tickets. Each time, Dad covered it. Mom would say, "He's just struggling to find his path. Be patient with him." I wasn't allowed to struggle. I worked 3 jobs to afford textbooks and rent. I remember calling home once from a bathroom stall at work after my car battery died. Dad said, "That's life. Figure it out." A week later, Mark totaled his car, and they co-signed for a new one. When I once hinted at how unfair things felt, Mom snapped, "Don't make this a competition. We've supported you both equally. Equally. That word still stings. Support wasn't the problem. Belief was. Mark was a project. A lost cause they loved rescuing. I was expected to be fine on my own. And when I wasn't, I was called weak. I stopped asking for help. I learned how to stitch myself back together with silence. They never noticed the bleeding, just the fact that I didn't stain the floor. Even in moments I should have been proud of, should have been seen, I felt like wallpaper in my own life. The day I got promoted at work, I texted our family group. Mom replied with a thumbs up emoji. Mark sent a meme that had nothing to do with me. That was all. Even on my best days, I was barely noticeable. The hospital discharged me 2 days later. I walked out slower than I went in, lightheaded, weak, and trailing a headache that felt like a nail buried deep in my skull. They diagnosed it as a TIA, a transient ischemic attack. A warning shot from my brain. The kind that tells you, next time, you might not wake up. I sent the discharge papers in the family group chat, just to make things clear. Mom replied, "Glad it wasn't anything serious. You're fine now, right?" Followed by the way, Mark needs help with his court fine. Can you lend him $600? No, how are you feeling? No, do you need anything? Just a quick pivot from my stroke scare to Mark's meltdown. When I didn't reply right away, my dad called. "Anna," he said like he was already tired, "your mom's worried you're mad again." "I'm not mad," I said. "I just had a stroke. Kind of takes up space in my head." He chuckled. "Come on. You didn't have a real stroke. They said it wasn't that serious, right?" There it was. That word again. Serious. Unless I came in bleeding from every pore or rolled in on fire, nothing I went through ever registered on their radar. The week that followed was full of tight smiles and tight chests. I couldn't concentrate. Lights were too bright, sounds too sharp. I found myself crying in the shower, overwhelmed by nothing and everything. My doctor recommended short-term therapy. When I told my mom, she said, "Just go outside and get some sun. That helps me when I feel low." I said, "It's not a mood swing, Mom. It's trauma." She rolled her eyes. "You always exaggerate." Mark, meanwhile, had no such trouble getting sympathy. He called me a few days later. "I know you're dealing with stuff," he said in that voice he uses when he wants something, "but if you could just float me that $600, I'd really appreciate it." "I can't, Mark. But it's just money. You make good money now, don't you? I just got out of the hospital. And you lived. So we're good, right?" That word again. Good. He hung up without saying goodbye. 3 days later, my parents showed up at my apartment. My dad stood in my doorway with a plastic grocery bag of oranges and a tight-lipped smile. "We thought we'd drop in," he said. "We figured you're probably still upset." I let them in, mostly because I didn't have the energy to argue. They sat at my table, complimented the curtains, and then dove right into Mark's situation. His license got suspended. "He might lose his job," Mom said, fiddling with her phone. "And he's talking about therapy now, which is good," Dad added, "but those sessions aren't cheap." I stared at them, wondering if they had even once sat down to talk about my recovery.
About my brain.
About how terrified I still was to sleep at night. Instead, I heard all about Mark's job, Mark's car, Mark's fines, Mark's struggle. And then, in the middle of a dry piece of store-bought pie, my father dropped the line that broke whatever part of me still hoped. "At least you're not on trial like your brother." That was the moment I finally saw the truth, whole and bare. I could disappear off the face of the earth. They'd only notice when Mark needed something I used to give. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I just started writing things down. Every time my mother made a snide remark about me, hoarding money, while Mark struggled, I noted it. Every phone call from Mark, every guilt-laced text message, every backhanded compliment, saved, screenshotted, cataloged. I became quiet. Not defeated, strategic. I smiled through dinners. I sent thank you texts for their visits. I even nodded politely when my dad said, "You really should think about helping your brother with rent next month. He's drowning." But inside, I was mapping an escape. I started with my finances. I'd always been careful with money. Years of scraping by through college taught me that. But something didn't sit right when I saw a small loan flag on my credit report. I hadn't applied for anything. I called my bank. They confirmed it. A loan taken out in my name, from a joint account I'd opened years ago, when I was still living at home and didn't know better. One my parents still had access to. And guess who the loan was for?
Mark.
The address? My parent house. I didn't cry.
I didn't yell.
I just opened a new account that same night. Transferred every cent I could. Then I froze the old one. I changed my passwords. I updated security questions. I removed them from every emergency contact list, every financial file, every traceable tie they could use. I reached out to Danielle, a college friend who'd become a family lawyer. We met for coffee and I laid it out. The medical neglect, the identity abuse, the emotional manipulation. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she leaned back, sighed, and said, "Anna, you're not being dramatic. You're being used. And, if you're ready, I can help you cut the cord completely." I nodded. I wasn't just ready. I was done. We went through every document. She helped me draft a cease and desist for future credit use. Showed me how to flag my credit for fraud protection. And just like that, brick by brick, I began building a fortress, silent and strong. I didn't make a scene. I didn't announce anything. I still answered their calls. I still smiled on FaceTime. I even let Mark rant about his new parking ticket without saying a word. But while they talked, I watched the walls go up around me.
Safe. Secure.
Untouchable. Because here's the truth. That night in the hospital when my body nearly gave out, I thought it was the beginning of the end. But maybe it was something else. Maybe, in that sterile white room, with needles in my veins and silence on the other end of the phone, something inside me shifted. If I wasn't dying that night, maybe I was being reborn. The first bang was silent. I filed the fraud report online. It took 20 minutes. I uploaded screenshots, confirmed identity theft, and flagged my credit profile for legal protection. The bank froze the account. The one they used behind my back. The one I funded. Then came the rest. I canceled the automatic payments I'd been making for my parents' utilities, the ones they never asked me for but always expected. The subscriptions I paid because your father doesn't understand tech stuff. I emailed our family accountant and removed myself from any shared estate documents. I wasn't going to be the unpaid secretary anymore. By the time they noticed, the foundation had already cracked. It was Mark who hit the wall first. He applied for a loan, a used car deal he thought he could finesse. He'd used my name before, probably figured he still could. Except this time, the bank said no. Red flag. Frozen file. Application denied. He called me, voice already raised. "What the hell, Anna? You messed with something, didn't you?" "I'm sorry," I said sweetly.
My loan got flagged.
I couldn't even get pre-approved. "Did you lock something down?" "Maybe you should focus on your meltdown," I said, echoing our mom's exact words to me in the ER. "You're not dying, right?"
Click.
5 minutes later, Dad called. "Why is everything frozen? Why is your name red flagged? The accountant said you pulled estate access. What's going on?" "I'm just organizing my life," I said calmly. "For God's sake, Anna, you could have at least told us." "Oh, like the loan you took in my name?" That kind of conversation. Silence. Then, "That was for Mark. He needed it. I needed you. In the hospital. Remember?"
They didn't reply, and I was done waiting for them to try.
Mom sent a long text thread the next day. Paragraphs of vague guilt, backhanded apologies, and emotional blackmail. "You know we've always relied on you. You've always been the strong one. Don't abandon us now. Not when your brother's struggling the most." That last line made me laugh. I'd been dying in a hospital bed while they were filling out his DMV paperwork.
And now?
Now they were scrambling, not because they missed me, but because they'd lost their personal assistant. No more free tax prep. No more password resets. No more bank transfers in the middle of the night. I stopped answering their calls. I muted the group chat. I let them spiral. Mark sent one last voice message. It was full of yelling, accusations, and one thing that made me pause. You've always been bitter, I was the favorite. Well, guess what? Even if you walk away, they'll still pick me. Maybe. But at least now I was done picking them. I listened to the message again, then deleted it. I stood in the middle of my apartment, surrounded by silence, not emptiness.
Peace.
I picked up my phone, stared at the contact list with Mom, Dad, and Mark at the top. I didn't block them. I didn't reply. I just whispered to myself, if you didn't see me then don't look for me now. The text came at 2:14 a.m. Mark's been arrested. He was driving on a suspended license. Please, Anna. We don't know what to do. I read it twice. First from Mom, then again from Dad. Identical messages, sent minutes apart. The silence I had once feared now protected me like armor. Mark had been pulled over for running a red light. The cop ran his ID and found the suspension flag, multiple unpaid tickets, a missed court appearance, and a bench warrant. They cuffed him on the spot. And just like that, the golden boy finally cracked. No one came to his rescue. Mom and Dad called everyone they could. Old friends, cousins, even a church acquaintance who'd once been a paralegal. Nobody wanted to touch it. So they turned to the one person they thought would never say no.
Me.
Anna, Mom pleaded over voicemail. You've always been the responsible one. Please, just help us navigate this. We don't know how to talk to lawyers. He could lose everything. He made mistakes, Dad added in his own message. But he's still your brother. We're still your parents. Family is forever. Funny, that phrase. Family is forever. Where was that slogan when I was lying in a hospital bed, terrified and alone, trying to remember how to spell my name during a stroke assessment? Where was that when they handed over my credit like it was spare change?
I didn't respond.
Not with words. Not with rage. Just distance. A new number. A new email. The final accounts disconnected. They weren't used to silence from me. Not used to not having access. I was always the bridge. The fixer. The one who answered at midnight and paid bills just for now. But now the bridge was burned. And Mark was drowning. Mom sent photos next. One of Mark in an orange jumpsuit, looking pale and stunned. Another of some legal document she clearly didn't understand, begging me to explain it. I said nothing.
Dad tried logic.
You've made your point, but you can't really turn your back on us forever. That's not who you are. He was wrong. This was who I was. Someone who finally understood the difference between being useful and being loved. Someone who knew that being their lifeline had nearly cost her own. Let them handle the chaos. The court dates. The fines. The same messes they once expected me to clean with a smile. Let Mark fall. He'd been held up for far too long by hands that never belonged to him. And let my parents finally face the truth. The daughter they once dismissed as too sensitive was no longer within reach. They finally noticed I was gone. But only because everything was falling apart. The first time I walked into therapy, I couldn't look the counselor in the eyes. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't know how to explain what wasn't there, what had never been there. Love, yes, but always with conditions.
Support, yes,
but only if I stayed silent. Presence, yes, but only when it didn't interfere with Mark's latest crisis. It took months, but eventually I stopped asking why they treated me the way they did. And started asking, why did I let them? That question was heavier, but it led me somewhere real. I joined a support group for daughters of narcissistic families. Women who looked just like me, composed on the outside, quietly breaking on the inside. One by one, we told our stories. And for the first time, mine didn't feel too much. It just felt true. I got promoted at work, moved into a team lead position. Suddenly, the people around me listened when I spoke. They asked for my opinion. They valued my boundaries. It felt foreign and beautiful. A few months later, I packed up my apartment and moved to a new city. No fanfare. No family goodbye. Just me, a clean lease, and silence that no longer felt empty, but earned. In that city, I built a life with intention. I planted herbs on my windowsill. I joined a yoga class where no one asked me to explain my bruises because now there weren't any. And one night, while scrolling through Reddit of all places, I found a thread titled, "Daughters Who Raised Themselves." I read every comment. Then I opened a blank document. And I started writing. Not to blame. Not to shame. Just to tell the truth. That document became a blog. That blog grew. Women wrote to me, strangers who called me a mirror or the voice I never had. I never named names. I never told dirty secrets. I didn't need to. The power wasn't in revenge. It was in reclaiming myself. A few months in, I was asked to speak on a podcast. The host introduced me as a brave advocate for daughters who go unheard. I smiled.
She meant well.
But when she asked me, live on air, "Do you think you're brave for walking away from your family?" I paused. Then I said, "Brave?
No.
Just free. I think there's a difference." I don't check my old group chats anymore. The silence that used to feel like punishment is now my peace. Sometimes I wonder what Mark's doing. If my parents still argue over dinner about how I turned cold. But those are just thoughts. Passing. Weightless. Because now, my life is mine. No guilt. No begging to be seen. No proving my worth to people who never questioned his. Just mornings where I wake up without dread. Just laughter that doesn't need permission. Just me, healing, whole, and finally,
free.
It had been 3 years. 3 quiet, steady, healing years. When the call came, I didn't recognize the number. But something in me knew. "Anna." My mother's voice trembled through the speaker. "Pleased, it's your brother. He's in jail again. It's bad this time."
She didn't ask how I was.
She didn't ask if it was a good time. She just needed. I didn't answer right away. I told her I'd think about it. Then I stared at the phone for a long time. I don't know why I went. Closure, maybe. Maybe curiosity. Or maybe part of me wanted to see it for myself. The mess they made without me. Their house looked smaller than I remembered.
Worn.
The yard unkempt. The porch light flickering like a dying breath. Mom opened the door. She looked older. Not in the graceful, silver hair and sunlight way. Older like something had been eaten from the inside out. Dad didn't say a word when I walked in. Just gave a stiff nod, like I was the mailman. They sat me down. Told me Mark had violated parole. Something about theft, resisting arrest, court fines unpaid for months. He might face real prison time this round. I listened. I didn't ask for details. Finally, Mom said, her voice cracking. We don't know what to do. We thought maybe you could help, talk to someone, maybe get him into a program. You always knew how to fix things. I looked at her. This woman who once told me not to call in a panic unless I was dying. This woman who chose a parking ticket over her daughter's stroke. I took a breath.
And said, gently,
"I needed you too, and you never came." She flinched like I'd slapped her. Dad looked away. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood. I pulled a small letter from my purse and placed it on the table. The envelope had no name, just the words, "that night." Inside was everything I never got to say. The panic, the silence, the truth. I didn't leave a return address. As I stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds. It felt warm, not like fire but like freedom. I didn't look back. Somewhere behind me, the ghosts of a family that never saw me finally held the mirror up to themselves. And I walked forward, into the light, because they thought my pain was small, that I'd cry, rest, and come running back. But pain ignored turns into power. And I used mine to walk away.